Hi, and thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Nicole.
And I'm your host, Jacqueline. Welcome to Perfictionist, where we share our passion for reading one story at a time.
On today's episode, we'll be discussing Hunting Adeline, the second book in the Cat and Mouse Duet by H.D. Carlton. As described on H.D. Carlton's website, Hunting Adeline is a dark romance that contains rape, graphic violence, sexual assault, explicit sexual situations, strong language, human trafficking, PTSD, and kinks such as degradation, knife play, blood play, and somnophilia. If you have any triggers at all, this may not be the story for you.
Yeah, any triggers. Like any.
Any.
Before we dive into our review of Hunting Adeline, let's start with a quick recap of Haunting Adeline. The story revolves around two main characters, Adeline and Zaid. Adeline, an author, has just inherited her grandparents' Gothic-style house along with a decades-old murder mystery.
Zaid, who is the leader of a vigilante organization dedicated to dismantling human trafficking rings, becomes obsessively fixated on Adeline after seeing her at a book signing and begins to stalk her relentlessly.
Meanwhile, Adeline and her best friend Dea are trying to solve the mystery of her grandmother's murder. During their investigation, Adeline reconnects with an old family friend, Mark, who turns out to be involved in the very trafficking ring that Zaid is working to take down.
By the end of the book, Zaid is infiltrating the ring, but is double-crossed and attacked while Adeline is kidnapped. Readers are left on a cliffhanger so steep that it would frighten a mountain goat.
But today we'll end the suspense as we delve back into this twisted world to review Hunting Adeline. For a more in-depth discussion of Haunting Adeline and the companion novella Satan's Affair, check out our spoiler-heavy discussion linked in the description and show notes.
Part 1. In Haunting Adeline episode, we were left wondering who the woman standing behind Zaid was, like the mastermind behind the whole operation. And we were questioning whether or not it was Dea. And for like the first few seconds of this book, I was starting to believe it was her. And I was kind of losing my mind because I was like, it cannot be. I would like
betrayal.
The betrayal.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I don't know, question mark, it ended up being a woman named Claire, who was actually Mark's wife.
If you don't remember, back in Haunting Adeline, we were introduced to Mark, who was a family friend of Adeline's, and it was revealed that Mark's dad was the one responsible for Addie's grandmother's death.
And Mark was also revealed to be part of the trafficking ring that Zaid was taking down and was one of the people that Sybil and Zaid kind of took out in Satan's Affair. Unfortunately, that meant that Dea was also taken, so she was not involved in the scheme, which left her to be therefore taken. But luckily for her, Zaid did figure this out, and he found her relatively quickly on in the book.
Okay, now we get into the like nitty-gritty of it. So Addie is taken to a house to be trained before auctioned off. Like trained.
Yeah.
It's so intense. Like, this was really interesting because there was so much survival involved, really. Mm-hmm. And I think, like, I can't even imagine suffering through what she went through in that house.
Yeah, this part, like the whole part 1 of the book, it took me a very long time to read because I would read a chapter and I'd have to put the book down and just kind of like do something else for a little bit because I was getting so kind of like emotionally involved with the characters. I was like, nope, I need to take a step back because this is so intense.
Yes. There's a lot to unpack like about what went on in that house. But like, let's talk about the culling.
Yeah. The culling is this, I guess, ritual that they do in order to break the girls. And they basically hunt them down through a forest, but the forest is like also has all these traps and it's like made into a maze, so they can't really escape. And yeah, they're like physically hunted down with crossbows, I believe.
Yeah. It's like Sorry, I'm just like remembering so much. There's so much flashing through my mind right now. But like, because wasn't there like a man assigned to each woman, and they're like all these kind of rich people,
Yeah.
and they're like excited to hunt the women. Ugh.
Yeah, they pick the girl that they want to hunt, and then there's also like people who just come to watch. So I'm assuming
Mm-hmm.
like certain people who are interested in purchasing get to
Mm-hmm.
play the game, and then everyone
Mm-hmm.
else who wants to just come and watch can just come and observe. And I think they have
Yeah.
like cameras and stuff attached to them, so the people who aren't playing can like actually like watch on screens what's going on. But I
Yeah.
could be wrong about that. That could have just been my imagination taking it
No,
even further.
I think you're right. It was like very. It was. I mean, like they've obviously got it organized pretty
Hmm.
well, and it was so sick. It was just like, ugh, I don't know. It just almost makes me feel ill thinking about it. But it was just like it almost felt like unreal and almost like I want to say futuristic or like maybe not futuristic, almost like sci-fi because it was just so like so bizarre that could like happen.
Yeah, it was
Whatever.
almost like Hunger Game esque in a way,
Yeah. Yeah.
or like
Yeah.
even
Exactly.
more brutal if you can imagine that.
Yeah.
It was very sad too that one of the girls kind of started following Addie and was like, "Oh, help me, help me." And then
Mm-hmm.
she ended up sacrificing herself to save Addie because they
Mm-hmm.
kind of got caught. And so the one girl sacrificed herself so Addie could get away. But then the brutal
Mm-hmm.
thing about the calling, not that any of this wasn't brutal already, but like
Mm-hmm.
the kind of cherry on top was any of the girls who were caught were then forced to be unalived by the other girls who were not caught.
Mm-hmm.
So Addie kind of
Mm-hmm.
mercy unalived this one character so that
Mm-hmm.
she would not suffer any longer.
Yeah. I think like the purpose of the calling not only is just for entertainment, but also to like strip away any remaining resilience and just like completely dehumanize the girls.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's like said to be like, it's like you're proving you're worthy of being sold by
Mm-hmm.
surviving it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it is. It's just that last breaking of them
Yeah.
before, so they're fully submitted to whatever's
Mm-hmm.
going on.
Yeah.
It is
Exactly.
just so disturbing. Like this
Yeah.
entire book is so disturbing in so many ways, but it's disturbing in the fact that like this isn't far fetched. It is from
Yeah.
our day to day life.
Well, for people who are not being trafficked, it is like, but if you like, I can't even imagine the horrors that people who are trafficked go through.
Hmm.
And so I know like this book has been really the whole series is really controversial, right?
Hmm.
And I mean, I think it's important, and I'm glad in a way that it's gone viral because I think it's addressing an issue that everyone just wants to shush other people about, and it
Hmm.
shouldn't be shushed. I don't think. I think it should be, even if it is like I don't know. It's kind of complicated because you obviously don't want to use a topic for entertainment purposes, but at the same time, like it brings awareness to something. And it honestly made me look deeper into trafficking. And I ended up finding out that trafficking is at its highest levels in BC that it's ever been. And I didn't know that.
Hmm.
And because of this book, I was educating myself more on a topic that I really honestly had no clue about really before. So while I think I can understand people saying like don't, misuse or glamorize that topic, I think it's also very important to shed light on a topic so that people do look further into it and educate themselves about it. Because I don't know, how can we do anything about something this horrible unless we actually people know about or at least know something about it.
Hmm. No, I 100% agree with everything you said. I can see why people might say this is glorifying trafficking,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
I personally take it as shedding light on something that is occurring that people like to pretend is not happening, but it is happening and this is impacting people. And this is potentially the reality of what someone might go through if they were in this situation. And I think pretending it doesn't exist is not helping
Yeah.
anyone.
Yeah.
And so by
Exactly.
shedding light, as you said, I do think it lets people see, like, no, this is something that is happening. And the fact that you feel absolutely disgusting while reading this is what I want you to feel, because this is disgusting.
It is. Yeah. And this is fiction. So that's, the tip of the iceberg kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm. One of the characters we meet along the way while Addie is in the house being trained is Sydney. And the first thing I thought when I met Sydney, or when we were introduced to Sydney, was I was like, oh, she reminds me of Sibby. Sibby. And she's very erratic and very unstable and kind of creepy, which I think you can use all of those to also describe Sibby, or Sybil, from Satan's Affair. And she plays a pretty big role in that. She does not like Addie, because Addie's nicknamed the Diamond because she is seen as a high ticket commodity, and that they can get a really high price tag for her because she is Zaid's girlfriend. People will pay a lot of money because they want to kind of stick it to Zaid. So Sydney hates kind of the pedestal that Addie is put on by everybody, and therefore goes out of her way to cause Addie even more pain by setting her up to be punished for things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so she's a very interesting character and plays a big role in what Addie goes through, because Addie's trying to, like, obviously do everything she can to
Mm-hmm.
not be seen, just kind of blend into the background. But
Yeah.
because of Sydney, that's not possible.
Sydney has obviously, she's in like extreme survival mode to the point where it's like, it's weird because it's like Addie doesn't want to be part of that little sort of mini culture they've got going on in the house. But whereas Sydney has like fully embraced it kind of thing for survival purposes, I would have to assume. But yeah, it's pretty intense. It's like the jealousy and stuff over something that, you know, I don't know. It's just really interesting the way like all the psychology that's going on in that house.
Yes. Yeah, the psychology, the manipulation,
Yeah.
yeah, very interesting from a psychological point of view. But ultimately,
Hmm.
Sydney kind of discovers that Addie's trying to escape. And so she's trying to stop her. And
Yeah.
so Addie ends up taking Sydney's life as a means of preserving her own. And that was kind of, I guess, the second person whose life Addie has taken, but
Hmm.
as a form of self protection.
So then there's this other character called Rio that we're introduced to, and it's kind of, yeah, it's kind of weird, like their relationship, like everything
Their
about this is
relationship
weird.
is so complicated.
Yes, just from what I can remember, because I did read this book quite a while ago, but like, so you, because she's in this house where nobody is her friend, right?
Hmm.
But then it's weird how like you start to almost feel, at least I did, like this, and maybe correct me if I'm getting this from misremembering, but like she almost, it's like if someone starts to show her like even the slightest kindness, you're kind of like, oh, are they maybe not fully on board with this idea of the trafficking? and
Yeah.
then and then I would find myself kind of thinking that, or like almost hoping it, because you're thinking, how is she going to get out of this situation? Like it'd be nice if she had some help, right? But
Yeah.
like then it's like, I don't know, it's very whiplashy, at least like that's the sense I got. It's like on one hand it's like, oh yeah, we could maybe like have an understanding, and then it's like, no, I'm going to exert
Hmm.
control and dominance over you, and it's like, what? Excuse you.
Yeah, because like Rio is the reason she's there. He is the person who kidnapped her and took her to the house. So he is completely at fault for her being there, being that he
Hmm.
orchestrated or like helped the whole kidnapping process. But then on the other hand, he is also tasked with caring for her because she's injured so badly in the way in which he kidnapped her through the car accident. So then he is kind of her pseudo doctor and he has to care for her. But then
Yeah.
as she endures more physical torture in the house, he continues to care for her. So it's like she's there because of him, but now he's caring for her.
So it's just like a very twisted thing.
One thing you might not remember is that the whole reason he is complying is because it's clear he's conflicted. But the whole reason he's complying is because they have his sister in a different house and they promise not to sell her as long as Rio complies. And then we also find out there's another layer that the mistress of the house, Francesca, is obsessed with Rio and is abusing him.
Yes. Okay, so there's many layers.
There's so many layers. And I feel like we often get these characters where they are both abused and abuser. And it is that morally gray of like they're being abused, but they're also an abuser. So how do we feel about that? Yeah.
I think it's like, for me, like when you find out that he's being blackmailed, right? And so he's complying. So it puts him in kind of almost a gray area because he's trying to protect his sister, right? So it's like all of a sudden, I like for myself, I know I would feel like a little twinge of hope, like maybe like, well, he's doing this because he's trying to protect his sister, but he like I don't know. I just remember just feeling like hope that he would like change his mind about the rightness of what and wrongness of what was going on there.
And I mean, eventually, I guess he does because he ultimately does help Addie escape. Like he makes it so that she's able to get out of the house and make a run for it.
Yes.
And so although he's the one who took her there, he was also the one who enabled a situation in which she's able to escape from there.
So he's just like he's obviously very conflicted, right?
Yes. And then when Addie meets his sister, because he's like, I will get you out. She's like, if you help me get out, I will make sure we get your sister out. And so he agrees. And they do. They get his sister out and she's brought to like a safe location. And Addie gets to meet his sister, Katerina, I think. And Katerina even says, I know my brother's a bad person, but he's a bad person because he loves me so much.
Yeah.
And it's like, how can you not be heartbroken when you hear that? Like,
yeah, I know. And I think it adds a lot of layers to the trafficking ring too, because it's not just brutalizing the girls. It also is essentially brutalizing its own members, right? So
well, just like their basic disregard for human life is like so
it's insane.
Prevalent.
Yes. Yeah.
And I mean, in the end, he is spared. Addie does say, I don't want him to be eliminated. I want you to spare his life.
Yeah.
And largely because of what Katerina said to her.
Well, yeah, and like because she could probably empathize with the fact that he was doing these terrible things on her behalf, right? If he was just now, if you remove the sister from the equation and he wasn't being blackmailed, this guy just needs to go, right?
Yes,
but like,
100%.
but because like there is this extra layer in there that he is like doing it for a reason, probably many of us can empathize with. It just makes it so complicated. I honestly don't even know, like because. You either sacrifice someone you don't know or you sacrifice your loved one, right? So it's like, it's just a really horrible, horrible position to be put in. And I honestly hope I never find out what that would be like, right? But I would not want to be put in that decision or in that position to make a decision in Rio's position.
Not at all. And I think Addie also maybe sees a little bit that if she were in a similar situation, she knows she wouldn't do anything different than Rio. So I think that's part of it too, is like, given protecting my family over this, then. But at the same time, she did sacrifice herself in other ways to protect people and it kind of took on getting hurt herself over someone else getting hurt. So yeah. There's a lot to it.
There's so much going on. I just want to say as an aside, like even though the topic of this book is so hard to read about, I personally enjoyed this book much more than Haunting Adeline, because in Haunting Adeline, I was very conflicted as to whether or not we should like Zaid. It's like, this seems very wrong, right? Yeah. In this one, there was a more clear right and wrong, like obviously in terms of not Rio and stuff like that. It's all very complicated. There's so many layers. But that's what makes it, I think, more realistic, because that's how life is. It's not very black and white. There's many, many levels of gray, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this one I think felt more like it was almost like it was like psychologically horrifying, but like almost an adventure story, because there was a more clear line of survival for Addie. So I
Yes.
ended up enjoying this book. Even though it was a hard read, I enjoyed it more, I think, than Haunting Adeline.
Yeah, they had very different vibes, especially the part one of this book was just
Mm-hmm.
tonally so different than
Mm-hmm.
Haunting Adeline. In part two, we do get more of the same. It's kind of almost like a blend of part one of Hunting Adeline and Haunting Adeline meshed together.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like
Mm-hmm.
the tone of part two.
Yeah. Yeah.
But part one is like a very different story.
And I still struggle with how Zaid decided to be with Adeline. But I still struggle with that to this day. I look at that and I'm like, that's so wrong. But like when they, and just skipping forward a bit and we'll come back, but like when they end up coming back together in this book. But I seem to remember that like he was very like respectful of
Mm-hmm.
what she may have gone through in terms of like the sexual end of things. He wasn't about to, like, in the first one it was like, is this rape? But in the second one it's like he's like really making sure she's good to go kind of thing before they get back to their usual stuff.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. And yeah, we'll discuss that a little bit in more detail.
Yes.
But 100% that's exactly how I felt as well when reading it.
Mm-hmm.
But still in part one, Zaid, on his end of things, is like desperately searching for Addie, and he enlists the Basilisk brothers. And I know we talked about this in a previous episode. I think it was our rating 1-star reviews, or reacting, sorry, to 1-star reviews, about how good looking men in stories like this, these morally gray, good looking men, get a pass, whereas all of the like real bad guys in these stories are grotesque looking. And
Mm-hmm.
I was hoping this story was going to be different, because there's a
Mm-hmm.
character named Rico who is the brother of Francesca. So he's the other person who runs the house that Addie's in. And I thought they were going to make him attractive, so that it's like, oh, there's this very, very attractive man, but he is pure evil. But
Mm-hmm.
no, they didn't do that. They very much stuck with the whole, all of the people who are bad but good were attractive men, and all of the people who were purely evil men, bad, no redemption, were grotesque. And I kind of have a problem with that.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I have read books where the good guy is like stunningly, or sorry, bad guy rather, is stunningly beautiful. And it adds, for some reason, it adds, and this is so stupid. Like now I'm gonna say it out loud, and I'm like, should I really say this out loud? But like it almost adds like an extra sense of betrayal. It's like, but you're good looking, you shouldn't be a good guy. And like that is such a ridiculous take.
It's because we're programmed. It's because we read
Mm-hmm.
all these books where it's like, if they're bad but they're good looking, we can expect that they're actually somewhat good.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're told that over and over and over again. And that is a very dangerous message to send people, in my opinion.
Totally. Yeah, but at the same time, like thinking about it in a realistic situation, if you were with someone who was like evil to his core and he was like stunningly beautiful, you're not going to see him as physically beautiful as you get to know him. He will become ugly, right?
That is true.
So it's how do you convey that in writing? So that's sort of tricky. But I
Mm-hmm.
feel like Sarah J. Maas did a good job, like with Erewhon on that, because he was like, I don't know if he was necessarily super beautiful, but like he also wasn't described as ugly though. He was like obviously not human like, but
Mm-hmm.
like but he also wasn't described as ugly. He was like
Mm-hmm.
terrible with his power,
It
right?
was almost like his beauty was grotesque. It was like he was so
Yeah.
beautiful, it
He
was
was so
like
beautiful it was
gross.
grotesque.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like,
Yeah, so
so
sometimes it's done
perfect.
like that. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
so perfect that there's something off about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I do think it is also true, and we have mentioned this before. It's like this is a story, so you do want it to be appealing to your readers. It is for, at some level, like its core is it is for entertainment. And
Yeah.
do we want to read about? We want to read about good-looking guys,
Mm-hmm.
even if they're bad. Like that's just
Yeah. I don't want to read about some average person with like average qualities. Like, it's like,
give
I
me
mean,
fantasy. That's what I'm here for.
there has to be, I mean, there obviously has to be, I mean, I guess, well, no, I'm going to argue with myself now.
I know.
I was
I'm like
gonna say, like,
contradicting myself here.
like, because like obviously like just because you're average looking doesn't mean you're an average person. Like you could have a really nice quality about yourself that then elevates your attractiveness into like super attractive realms, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to argue with myself all day about this.
Some of these things are hard to convey in writing. So it's like you
Yeah.
are using kind of maybe more stereotypical or like just tropes at work to convey points.
Because like when you first, because first impressions matter, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so when you're writing, if you want to write like like say just like a normal average person, and like, oh, he was a little pudgy around the middle, it's like you're like, oh, okay. You know, like I want to hear about his 10-pack or whatever. Right, like all right. But I think like you could probably work in and make the reader fall in love with despite that first impression, but now you have like this extra obstacle to get over for the reader to
Mm-hmm.
fall in love with this person.
Yeah.
So maybe it's just easier to remove that obstacle and to make them like uncommonly good looking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or like, you know, like instantly very attractive for whatever reason. Even if it doesn't appeal to the protagonist, maybe it's going to appeal to like the readers. Maybe the protagonist isn't into a 6-pack, but like most readers are probably not going to like argue if if the love interest has a 6-pack or whatever,
Yeah.
right?
It's not
Yeah.
going to turn them off by any means.
Yeah, exactly.
No. And yeah, these things are used to convey points very easily. It's like attractive equals good in some sense. And
Yeah.
we know that as readers. So therefore, it's an easy way to convey a certain level of like, even though these are bad guys, they're the
Mm-hmm.
good bad guys. And
It's like, here's a clue. You don't have to super hate these guys, right?
Mhm.
They look good. Oh, okay. They're a good guy.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a little a nitpick. I get why it's done, but
Yeah.
it's a little nitpick.
Yeah. Yeah. Part 2. So Addie escapes with the help of Rio. See, this is why he's complicated. And
Yep.
Zayd ends up finding her like just in time. Her escape was so tense.
Mm-hmm.
When she was escaping, I actually like it makes sense, like because obviously the author gives you a clue. Part 2 setting's going to change, likely,
Mm-hmm.
right? But even knowing that logically during her escape, I was like, I don't know, it just felt like tenuous because it's like because of her experience at the house. It was like it's like there's hope and then it's snatched away kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, is she really going to escape this? Like it just felt almost like maybe this isn't actually going to happen. At least that's how I felt.
I think the way that it was written, because we have the dual perspectives in this book. So we're going back and forth between Zayd and Addie. And when she's escaping, or like in that kind of between her escaping and her being found, we are going back and forth quite rapidly between the two. And it's kind of like in a movie where they're doing the dual perspectives and you're like, are these timelines going to meet up and converge where you think they are? Or is the one person actually like hours and hours later than you think they are? Or, so it's like
Yes.
it's that tension of like, is this going to line up? Are
Yeah,
they actually going to find
exactly.
each other when they need to find each other?
Mm-hmm. And I really enjoyed the setting that H.D. Carlton used for like that scene. It was like an abandoned train car, right? Very, very neat visually, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a big theme in Hunting Adeline. Like
I know, I keep
going to
wanting to
say
say the
Haunting
wrong one.
Adeline. Yeah, I'm like glancing at my nose. Hunting Adeline is survival, obviously, and trauma. Like these are givens. If this was not, if the trauma from this experience was not addressed, this would not be a very good story.
No.
I'm so glad that the author took time to kind of address this.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes I find, like, well, more so in movies than books, at least the books that I've read, that you have this like insane thing happen and then they're just powering forward through their adventure. I'm like, that is not how that would go. They're like cracking jokes. And like, I understand that you can do that as a way to cope, but you can tell in the movie, it's just like very surface level and like, oh, that thing is behind us now. And I'm like sitting there as a viewer, like traumatized by what happened to them practically, right? That's a strong word, but like kind of disturbed. And I'm like, and then I can't even enjoy the movie anymore. Cause I'm like, they wouldn't react like this. They just like, their friend just got chopped in half or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Like, they would not be like joking. If they were joking, it would be kind of hysterical. Do you know what I mean? Like, like, but you can tell that's not what this is. This is like us moving forward with our adventure. I'm like, dude, your friend just got chopped in half in front of you. Like, there's no way you'd be okay with that and just continue on. Like, so that ruins it for me. But this obviously doesn't. They don't do that in this book. In this book, the trauma is now like ingrained in Addie's personality from this point forward.
Yeah, no, and they definitely take a lot of time, like in the book where it'll be like 3 weeks passed, a month passed, like it jumps in time to show that like she's been having to deal with this, and this is not something like, for a book that is dark romance, you actually don't get any romance said kind of differently because it's
not romantic.
It's not romantic. Exactly. So we're using the term romance in a very, very broad sense. But the romance in this book doesn't happen until about 60% in, because we have the first part and then we have Addie healing from what happened in part 1. And all of that takes a very large portion of the book. So you don't actually get any intimate scenes until like at least 60% way in. Yeah. And I really appreciated that. I mean, Me too. Make up for it.
They do.
Get me wrong.
They do. But it would be super unrealistic and kind of almost vulgar if it happened sooner. It would be like, oh, that's just wrong because like Addie is not there yet, right?
And it's so gradual too in how it's done. It's very, very take your time. Like this person's not going to be healed. And she regresses as well. And I love that about it is you think she'll be doing better. She'll be getting out and starting to do things. And then she falls back into I guess you could say a depression or an episode of some sort. And then it's kind of like they have to start all over again.
Yeah, totally.
But one little light in the otherwise very dark novel is the return of Sibby. And yes, Sibby is very dark in her own right.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's funny that that's like a bright spot because like she is scary.
Very. And at first, okay, so in this book, Sibby's kind of used as comic relief. And at first that really bothered me because I'm like, this is a very, very mentally disturbed individual who needs help. And the fact that we're making fun of that in a sense, making light of it, at first I was like, this doesn't sit well with me. But then as it kind of continued on, they almost addressed that in such a way that it felt more palatable. Like they were saying she's more than just her broken pieces. Like, like this is who she is. She is this kind of fun, quirky individual, but it's very twisted because of the trauma she has gone through.
Yes.
In the end, I really, really liked how they utilized her character.
She reminds me a little bit of Harley Quinn, but like, but just like worse.
I imagine there is some inspiration there.
Yeah.
Yes. Now that you say that, I'm like, okay, that.
Well, and especially given like Satan's affair and how she's traveling with like a circus or like a, right? Like, is it a circus or is it like a?
It's like a traveling haunted attraction.
Yeah, a traveling, like a, there's a name for it. But
Carnival?
Anyway, carnival. Yeah, like a haunted carnival, kind of like spooky carnival or whatever. And, Harley Quinn, so it's kind of,
No, very similar for sure.
Her whole character is actually really like interesting, and when she was like reintroduced back in, aside from like all the sort of more serious things you were just talking about, and like she's because like so her comic relief is that she is very like unserious in the way that she portrays herself and sort of
Mm-hmm.
childlike as well, which is at very much at odds with like her actions, because she takes like some pretty I was just remembering some things from Satan's Affair, like getting flashbacks. Like, oh my god, she does some pretty vile things, right?
Yes.
Very vile. In fact, I remember in Satan's Affair, I had a very hard time getting through it because I was physically becoming nauseated by the things that Sibby was doing to people.
But if you asked her, it's not her fault. It was her henchman.
That's right. Her henchman, yes. But that being said, like these vile things, she's very capable of taking care of herself.
Mm-hmm.
But she also, because of that sort of childlike psychological state that she's in, she also kind of almost needs taken care of. So it's like a really weird oxymoron. I don't know. Her character is very opposite in many ways within herself, if that makes sense.
No, 100%. I think that it perfectly describes her because she is very capable. But Addie and Zayd almost become like her parents in a way. They almost treat her like a child because she acts like a child, but then at the same time is doing very adult things. And it is kind of in itself somewhat disturbing because you think of her as a child in some ways, but then you're like, no, she's an adult. And yeah, so it's like that contradiction.
It is, but they seem to like understand what she needs and like they seem to understand her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they just kind of, I don't know, provide that safe space for her to be herself, but also kind of pull her in a little bit. Like when she's getting dressed and she just picks out, like, they're like, okay, just order some stuff. And she just goes on the internet and orders whatever she wants, but she just picks things she likes, but none of it goes together because she doesn't have that sense. So then Addie's like, here, I'll switch coats with you so she doesn't look so ridiculous. Like, it's really sweet.
It is.
But one of the other fun things is we discover that Sydney is actually Sibby's sister. They were from the same cult. They have the same father. We don't know if they have the same mother. It's just all of the children within the cult were from the same father. So they are sisters. But Sibby forgives Addie for having to take Sydney's life and is like, it's okay. She was kind of evil anyways. I understand.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, Sibby.
I was not expecting to see Sibby in that book in such a prominent way.
Neither was I. I didn't think she was going to be in there at all.
Yeah, when she came back into the book, I was like, oh, no way. I was excited to see how she would integrate into the story, and it was really interesting the way she integrated into the story. And I was also kind of like, watch out, bad guys, they got Sibby on on their side. Like, it almost feels like she's like this like weapon that they have. So at the end of the book, Sibby runs away with a young man named Craven. And apparently there is a duology in the works that focuses on Sibby. In that duology, I assume we'll get some answers as to who Craven is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was wondering, I was like, did I forget something about Satan's Affair? Like, is he maybe one of her siblings? Because Craven also, he's like, oh, it's my dad's name. So I was like, was her dad named Craven? I didn't go back and look, but I did look it up. And according to the internet, people are saying that name was not mentioned in Satan's Affair. And then some other people are suspecting that he might be somebody from the institution she was held in, because he's kind of like a nurse almost. So maybe he was working at the institution when she was there and they fell in love.
Oh, my word. How inappropriate.
But I mean, are we against inappropriate things in this book?
Clearly not.
So as Addie heals, she does start to train with Zayd and Sibby, and the Z organization is continuing to dismantle the ring run by Claire. Slowly, they're starting to like pick off all the individuals involved, and ultimately leading to, hopefully, them taking out Claire is the goal.
Oh, she's so evil.
Mm-hmm.
The hate I felt for this woman is more than I felt for Erewhon. Okay.
No, agreed, 100%.
Yeah.
And maybe part of that is because it is set in the real world, so.
Yeah. I was thinking, like, is it because, like, our world is not at risk of Erewhon decimating it? Probably.
Could it be that?
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll talk about another theme. So another theme, and I feel like this theme was prominent, obviously, as well in Haunting Adeline, is love versus obsession.
Mhm.
Zaid is obviously very obsessed, like, and that is portrayed really well. Also, I think in part one, when we're seeing him like obsessively hunting for Adeline. I guess these books are just like
Spelling it
describing, like,
out
their
for you.
titles are just spelling out what Zaid's up to, essentially. Really cool titles though, when you think about it. Like,
Mhm.
those are good titles for the story. But Zaid is actually being very understanding of what Addie has gone through, and I'm just actually feeling really like, whoa, I can't even imagine how angry Zaid's character would be given what happened to her and like what his whole life's purpose is, which is like dismantling this ring. And then
Yeah.
she's actually taken into it and has to be subjected to those horrors. Like, holy smokes. At the same time, that was very foolish of these people to do, right?
Yeah. I don't know why they thought they could get away with this. Like,
Like,
it's like poking a bear.
yeah,
They very clearly
exactly.
tell you not to do that, and they're like, "Ha, don't poke the bear. This is the one I should not
Yeah,
poke."
we're gonna poke it with like, oh, the pointiest of sticks.
The pointiest. They shaved that stick up real good.
They did. But given everything that's happened to Addie, obviously she can't stand the touch of any man, and that includes Zaid. And I think
Mhm.
that's like, yeah, that checks out. Absolutely. Like, that would be horrific for her.
Yeah, I feel like this was a little bit of a redemption arc for Zaid's character
Mm-hmm.
in showing the reader like he truly does love her in a very obsessive and problematic way, but he does truly love her and is willing to give her the power. And that is talked about a lot in this book, that he's obsessed with her, but that's not a sign of like him having control over him. His obsession is actually kind of an example of how she has control over him. Like, she's the one in
Yeah.
control the whole time
Yeah.
because he can't control his obsession. Like, his
Mm-hmm.
obsession is showing how weak he is in a way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So he needs to build her trust back up and kind of start the relationship from scratch in a way, because of how their relationship started to begin with in such an unconventional manner, and with
Mm-hmm.
him essentially torturing her. The fact that she was then actually tortured in a way that she didn't
Yes.
enjoy. It's like, how can
Mm-hmm.
they go back to that place where she then enjoys the very thing that truly frightens her? Because she does like
Yes.
being scared, but
Yeah.
this was not
This is
a.
different though. Being
Mhm.
scared in a safe situation is different. Like, being scared when you're watching a horror movie is different because you know you're safe, right? I mean,
Yeah.
although I will go back on my own self and say, like, how did she know she was safe with Zaid in the first book? Because she actually didn't know him very well.
Hmm. And that's the weird thing, is like, to us as readers who are like, girl, how do you know? But it's like almost like they had some weird, it's almost like there's a supernatural element
Yeah.
kind of sprinkled in where
Like, they're
they
soulmates almost.
know
Like,
they're soulmates and they
yeah.
trust
Yeah.
each other instinctually.
Mm-hmm.
And she knows
Mm-hmm.
this is different. So
Mm-hmm.
I think we are supposed to kind of accept that she has
Yeah.
accepted that he would never actually truly hurt her.
Yeah.
But yeah, as readers, that's hard. And he does some
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
messed up things in this book that, like, then, because, like, he's being so kind and caring with her and, like, letting her take control and letting her, like, showing her that she has the power and the control. And then he carves a rose into her flesh. And I'm like,
Why
dude.
would you do that, bro? Like,
I mean, she
she
asked
has.
for it, but, like, I'm like, oh my
I
goodness, I
feel
don't
like
know.
I know. So Zaid, I feel like he's like, I understand all your deepest, darkest desires, and I won't judge you for it, right?
Mhm.
So he's probably thinking, oh, she needs this pain to help, like, release some of this pent up horribleness that's inside of her. Is what like I was getting from that.
Yes,
But
but
at the
at the
same
same
time, it's
time,
like, how can you carve up her flesh, like, after what she's been through? Like,
and he, like, because she has scars on her body from what
mm-hmm,
she went through at the house,
mm-hmm,
and he
mm-hmm.
cuts each of the scars, like she tells him which ones to cut in order to, like, kind of take back those
Yeah,
scars.
yeah,
But then the rose thing, it was like she kept saying I love you, and he's like, you keep saying it, but I don't believe you. Show me. And so her allowing him to carve the rose was her showing that. So it's like she had to prove herself, and that's the part that I didn't like.
I actually hate that. And
Yeah.
I think that it makes me want to say the F word. It's, like, come on. Like, she's been through enough. She doesn't need to prove anything to you.
Mhm.
F off. Like,
No, 100%. Like, I was so angry at him. I'm like, I feel like this kind of undoes everything that I was starting to feel for him and all his
yeah.
kindness. Because I'm like, why would she have to prove, like, yeah, why would she have to prove anything?
Mm-hmm.
If she says that she loves you, just believe her.
Yeah. Like, give her the gift of your trust, for God's
Mhm.
sakes. Like, why are you making, like, that was so messed up to me. And it, like, if she had said, like, oh, carve a rose on my body will prove my love to you, that would be his opportunity to be like, oh, babe, no, that's messed up. Like,
Yeah.
I do not want to scar your body further like those tyrants did.
hmm But I mean, their whole relationship is very, very unique to them. And that's fair if they are both consenting adults and they are choosing this life. But like, yeah,
Fine.
some of the things he does.
That
And
was
then,
hard
like,
to swallow, though. That
that
was
was
like
so
a
hard.
hard one. Yeah.
And then for me, when he essentially ties her to a tree, which I'm like, ouch, that would feel awful.
Yeah.
But he tells her that he has removed her IUD without her knowledge and that he's going to impregnate her. And I'm like, that's taking it too far. It's taking it too far.
I forgot that part. I feel like my mind blocked it out. Also, like, when would he have done this?
But he didn't do it. That's the thing. Is he told her he implied that he did it, but he didn't actually do it. But he wanted to test her to see what she would do in that situation.
Zayd is problematic, and he continues to be problematic.
I mean, he had a moment of redemption and then they threw it all away. And I'm like, why are you doing these things?
It seemed effed up to me, the fact that she went through all of this, and then for him to treat her like that.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems to me like she's stuck in this never-ending hell. Essentially.
Yeah. So still on the fence about how I feel about Zayd, because every time it's like you give him an inch, he takes a mile kind of situation.
Yeah. But you can't deny, like, her attraction to him, I guess, so it works. And I guess that's kind of what makes it like a dark romance, is the wrongness of a lot of it. I think it's just given the idea that she has gone through all of this and is now being subjected to this. It just seems like so much of her control is being taken away from her. And it's kind of like, it would just be super cool if it's, and maybe this is a little bit of a criticism and maybe I shouldn't say it, but like, it would just have been cool if he could have been his weird, creepy self in a way that gave her power.
And I do think they try and frame it in that way, but I'm not sure it's working for me personally. But
Right,
hopefully
yeah.
it works for them.
This all said, I still really enjoyed the story. But like, yeah, there was some parts in it where I was like really struggling to get on board with Zayd being the love interest after some of the ways that he was treating her, because it just felt like it exposed a lot of things that were wrong with their relationship. That was something that I was like, this is not cool, because in Haunting Adeline, like that obviously in real life would be very bewildering, but like if she's cool with it, then it's okay, right? Because consent is a beautiful thing. but like
Essential, some might say.
Yes, essential. But in this one, it felt like, okay, like the idea of implicating that he removed her IUD without her knowledge is not consensual, so that is problematic. Like, if you guys do messed up things that pushes the boundaries, but everyone's consenting, even where it's like blurred lines, but then you decide, like Addie often does, like, I like this, then it's okay, because in the end she's given her consent. But like, but like that's not that. I don't know. That's just so messed up to
I
me.
feel like the consent needs to be given before, not when someone is like about to. It's like she is upset about what's going on until she's almost about to have her like release. And then she's like, oh, never mind, I like this. It's like you can't consent to something when you're in that position. But I guess she does that also when she's in the house and she's not okay with it. So they do, like, H.D. Carlton does a fairly good job of like distinguishing between what Zaid does with her and like the trauma that she goes through. And I think that is seeing those two is supposed to help the reader understand that their
Differentiate the
relationship is
difference.
different,
Yeah.
and it isn't abuse when they're doing their thing, and that she is enjoying it.
Yeah, and like Zaid does try to tell her. Even I feel like he even tries to tell her like with words. He's like, "You like this type of thing," and it's almost like she's just like, "I just can't admit it because it's like shameful or whatever." Like societal cultural expectations and stuff. But in this book, she's been pushed to like the very edge of what she can withstand. And then I feel she then comes in a full circle and comes to accept that part of herself is just that way. And that's why Zaid is perfect for her.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's just as readers, it's hard for us to come to those terms, or at least for myself. I shouldn't speak for other people, but because I would not be okay with any of this.
No.
This is not
Yeah.
what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's very hard to then accept someone else's acceptance of it.
Yeah.
So I think that's really where the tie-up is. And it's like, I guess it's just being judgmental and therefore being hard to relate to that.
So I guess in a way, there's some themes of like self-acceptance explored in this story as well. And maybe that's why like she's so accepting of Sibby and stuff like that. Essentially, like there is a dark part of her that she does come to embrace. And like that's why we have to be okay with it. Because if she's okay with it and she's the protagonist, we also need to be okay with it because like, right?
This is her story.
It's not for us to decide what's okay for her. It's up to her to decide what's okay for her.
No, and I think that like perfectly segues into like kind of a discussion around like the corruption of Adeline and what she goes through.
So, okay, so I mean, like what's happened so far in this book? She's killed people and it was out of survival, right? So that for me is a gray area because what could she possibly do? Like you have to do crazy things in crazy situations. But I feel like that after everything she's gone through and then like the thing with Zaid, everything with Zaid and everything, it's like she is almost being, I mean, she's being put in the perfect position to accept that there is a dark side to her.
Yeah, it's almost like in Hunting Adeline, like you mentioned, she had that shame.
Oh, Haunting
it's
Adeline,
like
yeah.
Haunting Adeline. Yeah,
Yes.
The first one.
Yeah. The first one, yes.
She had that shame and she had these proclivities or these like desires, but was kind of suppressing them. And like they were slowly being teased out. And then at this point, she's become a full-blown criminal. Like she's, by the end of Hunting Adeline, the second book.
Yes.
She fully embraced that side of herself.
Yeah.
And it's her journey.
It's kind of perfect in terms of a dark romance because she can be fully Zaid's partner in that way because he is operating on the edge of what is lawful. Well, I don't think what he does is lawful, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Maybe it's moral. It's not lawful, it's moral, right?
Yeah. It's the vigilante kind of aspect.
That's the vigilante.
But they're a full-fledged team now because she's like helping him within the organization. And it's like they're this like crime fighting vigilante criminals.
Like the king and queen of like vigilantes almost.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think this is a great example of another key theme that is found in Hunting Adeline, which is that power versus control. And I feel like we've talked about this in several different ways already, but we see this theme not only in Adeline regaining her autonomy by embracing her dark side, but also in the power dynamic that we see play out with Zaid and Addie in their relationship.
Yes. And we also see this theme in the psychological manipulation that happens throughout the book, especially within the trafficking ring, as well as how Zaid uses control as a means of protection.
No, it's, oh my goodness, their relationship is so incredibly complicated. It has like so many, I don't know, aspects to it that can be, I think, explored in and of themselves. But I think one of the major ways in which power and control impacts the story is through the character of Claire, and like her ultimate goal, like her motivation and kind of the driving force behind this entire story, like this part of the book, is that she wants to control everyone. She wants to gain power and control society, which is why she basically is the top of this trafficking ring. It's her way of doing that. And she desires to take it even further by asking Zaid to kind of, I guess, work with her. So instead of being enemies, she's like, let's instead work together, and you can create some technology that controls people, and I can control the world. Bahaha. But we'll make it a good one without trafficking. So everyone's happy. And it's like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
We're all happy. Why?
Yeah. It's just bizarre. Yeah. It's like she's like basically like, I don't know. It's like a very, so this book, I just want to say this book is like very obviously complex with everything that it explores. And I think it was done really well. And then you have Claire and she's like, I would take over the world.
She's like that evil, like incarnate.
Yeah.
Of just like how power is corruption.
Yeah, she's one of the most evil people I've read about, I think. Like in a fiction. Yeah.
I think that her whole character definitely is like serving as a warning to readers of like the whole power to corruption pipeline.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's like kind of, I think that's emphasized in the fact that after they take Claire out, and I guess she was running a shadow government in behind the government. And so they're like, oh, now who's going to take over the shadow government? There's got to be someone pulling the strings in the background. And Sibby's like, I'll do it. And at first everyone's like, haha, you're so funny, Sibby. But then they come to realize she's actually kind of the perfect person to do it because her intentions are so pure. She doesn't want power. She just wants everyone to be good. Like she just wants only good people. And it's like, how incredibly wholesome is that in a very, very sick and twisted way?
Yes. That is Sibby in a nutshell. Wholesome in a sick and twisted way.
Yes.
Very sick and twisted. Okay, I want to put emphasis on that. But there's a very wholesome side to her, it seems.
But I mean, like, she's such a beloved character. The fact that she's getting 2 whole books dedicated to her, clearly she's a fan fave.
Very, very much. And I can see why. Yeah, absolutely. So let's give it a spice and darkness rating.
We kind of mentioned this, but like spice-wise, it doesn't hit until about 60% in, but then it hits and doesn't stop hitting. It hits so hard, you're like, can we just pause for a minute?
The spice is extreme once the spice is introduced.
Starts. Yes, exactly. I would say it's like a 5.
I would say a 5 chili pepper. And then darkness, I would say is 5. Or yes, I would say is 5. Absolutely. Yeah. Yes.
I would probably say 4.5, maybe 5.
I feel like I'm going to oscillate between those two because for me, Satan's Affair is like the level with which I match darkness against. And I don't know if it was as dark as that, but what happened in the house was very messed up. So yeah, 4.75.
Yeah, it's like so close to being a 5, but it's just, it is a 5, but it's not as dark as Satan's. It's just not as visually grotesque as Satan's Affair.
Yeah.
So I guess it's a 5, but it's a 5 in a slightly different way.
Yeah, totally. Can I give a book recommendation?
Of course you can.
Okay, it's in a completely just 180 in terms of this. This is absolutely nothing like the book we just discussed. I have read a wonderful book in this last couple weeks, and I wanted to share it as a recommendation. And I know a lot of other people have really enjoyed this book as well. But it's The City of Brass, written by S.A. Chakraborty. It's the first book in her Devabad, I think is how it's pronounced, trilogy. And it's a fantasy series, and the setting is very like Middle Eastern. It's giving Middle Eastern. But it's, I don't want to say too much more, but the novel follows the journey of a woman named Nari, who is a con artist in 18th century Cairo. And she ends up discovering kind of a connection in the mysterious world of, I don't know how to say this word, like jinn? It's like genies, sort of. But anyways, yeah. So it's just absolutely fantastic. It's the best book I've read in a long time. And so I just can't recommend it enough. So I wanted to mention it.
Yeah, I was excited when you said you read it because it has been on my like future TBR, my like not immediate TBR, but like books I want to eventually get to. Yes. It has been on that list since like we started this podcast.
The writing is fantastic. Like I've been reading like a lot of garbage recently, and I will never mention those authors' name because I obviously don't want to like do that.
We don't want to offend anybody, but we also aren't going to recommend them.
But like exactly. And like when I read City of Brass, it really made me realize the difference in storytelling quality, rather. Mm-hmm. It is so immersive and complete, like spice level 0 though. So just like, but a beautifully written story. So spice level 0.5. Okay. Like not quite 0. 0.5.
They hold hands.
I
don't know. I haven't read it.
it's pretty much like, like that. But like the storytelling is so, and you get, it's just, I can't recommend it enough. So yeah, if you've been curious about that one and you've been on the fence whether you should spend the time and read it or the money, like it's 100% worth it.
I feel like I have so many series on the go, but I need to like wrap up a couple series I have on the go because there's so many more that I have like in the wings that I want to get started on. Mm-hmm. I just need to read more.
Yeah, I'm reading The House of Sky and Breath finally. It's very information heavy.
I am still working on ACOTAR. I was determined to have it read by the end of this year. It's still a possibility.
Oh my
maybe.
Gosh.
We'll see. I mean,
I've
I have to
started
because we
rereading
want to cover it. So
I've started rereading it.
Oh, you'll have it reread before I read it once. Oh my gosh. Okay, it has to happen. It just has to happen.
Yes, it does.
Everything else on pause. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode.